Afternoon. All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started today. Good morning. Welcome to the session of STEM Week 2023. The session, I Love Hawaiian Pizza, the Science of Taste and Flavor. My name is Stephanie Andres. I am a civil engineering major at Prince George's Community College, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. So just going to go over a few housekeeping rules. There will be a feedback survey, and you all should submit it for extra credit points in case your professors are giving us such. It also helps improve STEM Week in various aspects, and the survey will automatically enter you all for a raffle that we do every session. Also, photographs may be taken during the session and may be shared within the community college. And by staying in the room, you're just consenting that your photograph might be taken. And last thing, just feel free to ask questions as we progress throughout the session. If you want to just in the chat, send a message. I'll be looking out for the chat. Or if you just want to unmute, feel free. Great. So I'm going to now present our presenter for today. So it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Dr. Cynthia Gossage. She has a degree in biology and classics from New York University. And in case you all are wondering what classics is, it's ancient languages, ancient history, culture, architecture, and she also has a Ph.D. in nutrition from the University of Maryland. She has also been teaching nutrition and food science at Prince George's Community College since 1994. So I'm going to go ahead and give her the floor now. So let's all welcome her. Thank her for being here today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to see so many nice people here. We are going to talk today all about taste and flavor. And my goal is to give you the scientific background and then leave you with some thoughts about how to translate that into your own lives. So what I would like you guys to do right now is think about what is your favorite food. And I'm going to put the whiteboard up if I can here. Let's see. There we go. I'm going to put the whiteboard up and I'm going to ask you guys to you can either hit text and type, or you can hit draw and you can handwrite if you want some foods that you love. Stephanie's here with me with pizza.
We have a few here in the comments. I'll just go ahead and read them out loud. Kayla says ramen. Jackie says desserts. Leslie says fried chicken and pizza. Faith says tacos. Might have to specify. I want to know which kind. Daniel says fried chicken and fries. Khadija, Caribbean food. Patricia, pasta. Me too. Monate says Old Bay wings. And Priscilla says pizza. Sushi. Excellent. Danielle says sushi.
Okay. And we got, let's see, one of these things is hidden behind. Macaroni. Is that macaroni and cheese? I got too many things on my screen. I can't see. And I see jerk chicken. Excellent. Faith? Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, great. Faith says, I also like spicy beef curry.
Do you like that over rice or over something else? Noodles?
Maybe rice. Faith, maybe rice, noodles. I like my curry with rice.
Okay. Okay. Some people are particular about what they like, right? Okay. And Stephanie, anything else in the chat?
I don't see anything. I believe I said Danielle mentioned sushi.
Yes.
Leslie King, I like everything that everyone has listed.
Okay, that is good. You are not a picky eater then, right? All right. Excellent. So I want you guys, somebody gave a gold star to jerk chicken. So I want you guys to just hold those thoughts for a sec and let me get the slides back up. Okay. So what we like is based on a whole bunch of factors, right? Where we grew up, what our families fed us when we were little, I have a nephew who, he doesn't like it anymore, but when he was 2 years old, his favorite food was hot and spicy tofu. Now that is not a typical thing for a 2-year-old, but that's what his favorite grandfather fed him. And so he associated that, right? So we have cultural connections, we have emotional connections, we have just sort of basic, our own personal history, right? But all along, what's driving a lot of that underneath it is this combination of taste and flavor. And I am saying they're different, right? Because that's what food scientists say. And I'm wondering if anybody in the room already knows what the difference is.
Anybody, any guesses in the chat?
Taste versus flavor. Wow, okay, so great. Everybody's gonna learn something new today. Ready? Of the two, taste is much simpler. Taste is an interaction between a handful of chemicals like sugar or sodium chloride and chemical receptors on our tongues and nerves that go to the brain. That's it. That's all taste is. There's a handful of chemicals that trigger things in the cells in the tongue. Those cells then send nerve signals to the brain, to a very particular part of the brain that lights up and says, ah, sugar, or ooh, salt. Okay, that's taste. Flavor, way more complicated. Flavor, and we're going to look at this in steps. Flavor is taste, but it's also the mechanics of how food feels in your mouth. And it's even things like how hot or cold the food is, or the drink, right? It's a very wide range of flavors. I'm sorry, very, very wide range of chemicals that produce what we sense as flavor. And where taste is pretty straightforward across all people. Like, you know, all babies love the taste of sugar, pretty much. Flavor is different. Flavor is something that we learn often when we're very little. Again, that's what we're introduced to when we're babies or young children. Okay, so we're going to look at taste for a little bit, right? And some of you guys already know this, right? 5 basic tastes. They're listed here. You guys, how many of you guys have heard of umami? What do you know about umami?
Leslie says yes. If you'd like to.
Yeah, Leslie, you want to expand on that a little bit?
She may be typing.
She may be typing. I will say this, those of you who said favorite foods included anything with meat or cheese or soy sauce, you like umami. Because those foods have that, they trigger the umami sensors in the tongue.
We did have a few replies here.
Okay, please.
Leslie said it is about flavor. Danielle, is umami like MSG?
Yes.
Paul, is it associated with meat? Leslie, Japan food?
Yes, yes. In fact, umami is a Japanese word because it was the receptors in the tongue for that sensation were discovered by a Japanese scientist. So he got to name it. It translates roughly in English into this word we call savory. So some of you guys know there's people make distinctions between sweet dishes and savory dishes, right? So the tongue, so this obviously human tongue, right? What we have on our tongue is we've got taste buds. And I did clip this. Yes, I did clip this from YouTube. Any of you guys who are biology majors, this website, this YouTube channel, he's got some really helpful videos if you're looking for study aids. I like this because it's so super clear, right? So here is the top of a tongue, and this sort of bulby thing, this is a taste bud. Anything that we identify as sweet or salty or sour or bitter or savory, it's because some very specific chemical came in contact with these little things called taste hairs. And they triggered a change in one of these taste cells. And those taste cells underwent what they call depolarization, right? So that they actually are sending a nerve signal. And these are the nerves that are running off to the brain. Does that make sense to everybody? Excellent, excellent. And the reason why we know that we have these 5 tastes, and maybe we have that 6th taste for fat, is because we've literally, scientists have literally, they have identified specific chemical receptors for NaCl, for acid, which is what sour is. There's a handful of compounds that produce a bitter sensation. Sugars produce the sweet sensation. And savory is produced by something called glutamic acid, or somebody mentioned MSG, which stands for monosodium glutamate. Glutamic acid or glutamate, that's an amino acid. Does anyone ask anything before I scoot ahead?
We actually do have a couple of questions.
Okay, great.
See, Sam said, he asks, what's the difference between bitter and sour?
Great question. Does anybody feel like they can explain that? This does get a little tricky, right?
I couldn't say.
You couldn't. Okay, so let me take a stab at it. Sour, think of vinegar. Think of lemon juice. Think of sensations in the mouth that kind of go, ooh, they kind of, to me, they're like a little spark. Bitter is more like, think about black coffee. No milk, no sugar, just black coffee. Or think about really strong tea. Or think about chewing up, especially red grape skins. And there's a sensation usually towards the back of your tongue. There's almost a sensation, even if you like bitter, there's almost a sensation of your tongue is trying to push that substance forward. Do you guys know what I mean by that? And did that, whoever asked that question, was that a satisfactory answer?
Sam, you feel satisfied with the answer? Maybe a little more, okay, great. Sam said yes.
Okay, fantastic. Other questions?
Leslie asked, you mentioned genetics related to flavor. How does that come into play?
Oh, perfect. Just along the lines of bitter again. First of all, we taste these things because we have taste buds. And we literally, some of us have more taste buds than others. Some of us may have more taste cells that are detecting sweet than others versus bitter. Bitter is a perfect example of this. There are people who literally have fewer or who have more taste cells specifically for bitter. And that means that there are people for whom any kind of bitter tasting chemicals just set them off. Are there people in the room who really, you hate coffee? You don't like vegetables, like dark green vegetables. You don't like broccoli. You don't like kale. You don't like Brussels sprouts. If that's you, then you have apparently inherited genes that make your tongue express a lot of taste cells for bitter. And so even a tiny bit of bitterness might feel overwhelming to you. Whereas there are other people for whom there are very, very few taste cells that will detect bitter. And so we don't even really sense it. We can eat those things that have those compounds and we don't notice it because we don't have the right receptors. Does that help?
Leslie, feel good about the answer? She said yes.
Okay.
I also have a question myself. Some individuals have mentioned to me that the cilantro, the herb, tastes soapy. Is this also in the same category as what we're discussing right now?
That is a fantastic question that I will admit to not knowing the exact answer to, but I can speculate. And that is, I think that's probably not taste. I think that's more flavor. I think there must be either chemical compounds in there that evaporate inside our mouths, and they create an odor that tastes like soap. And I know what you mean. That's one speculation. Another speculation is there are other kinds of chemicals in food we're going to see in a minute that produce not taste, but physical sensation. So to cut to the chase a little bit on that, think about chili peppers. You put chili peppers in your mouth and it feels like they're hot, right? It feels like literally the temperature inside your mouth just went up, and it didn't. And I'm wondering if there isn't something in cilantro that produces a physical sensation that is similar to soap. And if there are my guess is if there are any of the physiology instructors in here, they might know the answer, and they're perfectly well. I'm happy to have you chime in if you know the answer.
If anybody knows or wants to chime in, or later on, if you maybe want to.
I'm gonna write down a note to look that up, because that's a really good question that I should know the answer to. Stephanie, any other questions?
We do. We actually have a couple of more.
Okay, please.
Great. Let's see. Danielle asks, hopefully I pronounced your name right. Sorry if I didn't. Does that change as you get older?
It does. Do you already know which way it goes as you get older?
I can take a guess, but I don't.
Take a guess.
I would think not that you lose them, like, I don't know.
You do.
You do?
You do. You don't lose all of them.
Mm.
But, it's like anything else. As we get older, our hair thins a little bit, right? As we get older, we lose a little bit of muscle tone. As we get older, we start losing taste buds. Taste buds are like any of the other cells that line the digestive tract. And those of you who've taken biology class, you might know they only last a few days, and then they have to be replaced. That takes a lot of energy. And as people get older, the body doesn't spend quite as much energy. So we have literally fewer taste buds. So our taste sensation drops. Which explains, if you think about it, in your life, who are the pickiest eaters that you know? Oh, I don't want that. I can't eat that. They're not the 70-year-olds in your life, right? They're the 2-year-olds in your life, the 3-year-olds in your life, because they have so many taste buds that they have. I'm gonna just jump ahead for a second and give you guys some, and I'll come back to this, but I'm gonna give you some words since you're asking these questions. Younger people with more taste buds, they have what we call hypergeusia. You guys know hyper means a lot, right? Older people, we get hypo, right? Under, right? We can also end up, depending on situations that we're in, whether we have certain diseases or we're being treated for certain diseases, where our taste changes and food that we used to love, we can't stand temporarily. People on chemotherapy often say that meat, which to most of us tastes if we eat meat, it's good, it's savory, right? They say it tastes like metal. Very unpleasant. So yeah, we definitely change over our lifespan.
Great. We have a few more if you feel.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Micah asked, what makes someone a super taster?
The number of taste buds. Literally the number of taste buds.
Jackie asked, do you think taste is hereditary?
I do. And if we're talking about this, literally this salt, sour, bitter, sweet, savory, I think that is hereditary, generally speaking.
Okay, great. Monet says, I feel that way about lamb and steak. It tastes like metal to me.
Ah, okay. So there's something different about your taste buds. Something different is being triggered, or something is happening differently in the way the signal is being transferred to the brain. Interesting.
That's interesting. I actually had lamb recently and it tasted like goat cheese. That's sort of what it tasted like to me. It didn't taste
Pungent.
like metal at all.
Okay. Yeah. And here's an interesting thing to think about. And this kind of goes back to the question before about the difference between bitter and sour. Some of what we're talking about, and certainly the way I'm approaching it, is kind of as a physiological thing. But some of it is also linguistic. How do we, what words do we use to describe what sensations? And it's if you the way I think about that is it's a little bit like color. When we look at color, this is not the topic of today, but just as a little illustration, when each of us look at color, unless we have color blindness, almost all of us will look at a color and say, that's red, for example, not yellow. But within red, some of us might see it as kind of a purpley red or an orangey red or brownish, you know what I mean? Or we might have words like it's cherry red or it's apple red or it's, I don't know, rose red. And I think taste is a little bit like that too, depending on how we think about the words and what they mean to us. We may or may not be describing the same sensation, but it may sound like we're describing something different, if that makes sense to you guys.
Okay, great. Julissa asked, is there a reason why some people can tell a difference between water?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Because water, unless you buy distilled water, which has been treated to remove literally everything but the water, and you bought it in glass, which didn't transmit any new other chemicals back to it, then what we sense as water is water plus whatever's dissolved in it. And what's dissolved in it is a combination, if you get your water from the tap, it's a combination of anything the water treatment plant put in, like chlorine, fluoride. But even if it's just out of a well or a river or a lake, there are compounds that are dissolved in that water, and they're in minute quantities. But especially if you are a super taster, you're going to taste the difference between the water. People who live in New York City say it's the best water in the entire world, right? You're going to taste the difference between that and maybe Chicago water or Baltimore water or, I don't know, Charlotte, North Carolina water. Yeah, people can taste that for sure.
Okay, let's see. I will just get through these. We have like 3 more and then we can proceed.
Okay.
People keep asking. Good. They're
I
engaged.
know, right? So we should
That's
answer
great.
them.
Leslie asked, how do you address foods you didn't like as a child that you now like as an adult? For me, it was asparagus, but I love it now.
I feel the same way about cantaloupe. I couldn't stand cantaloupe as a kid, and now I adore it, right? I think, and I don't know how old you are, Leslie, but I think some of it may have to do with this this sort of falling away of some of our taste buds so that the tastes soften a little bit. They're not quite as overwhelming. That's number one, could be. Number two could be that you've developed other either emotional or social cues, such that maybe asparagus means something to you almost symbolically now, but it might symbolize spring. It might symbolize a spring holiday. It might symbolize the person who introduced it to you as an adult. That, you know what I mean? That's what I think.
Great. Hopefully Leslie feels good about that answer.
Yeah,
That was really
hopefully.
informative.
If not, ask again.
I actually wrote Thanksgiving for me, like it symbolizes Thanksgiving for me. I love asparagus.
Right. That makes total sense.
Leslie mentioned, I think it is about my age.
Okay, could be. I definitely enjoy things as an older adult that I did not like, even as a young adult.
Well, it's interesting. Next question. Paul asked, can you be conditioned to dislike what you once liked and vice versa?
I would assume so. You know, again, I'm not sure that I could come up with a physical reason for that, other than if you have undergone some kind of medical treatment or a disease condition that has physiologically altered your mouth or your brain. But same like what I was saying to Leslie, I think, if certain foods now you associate with unpleasant circumstances, then, whether they're personal circumstances or whether they are, my guess is, and I'm not a vegetarian, but my guess is that for people who are vegetarian, especially for some strongly held ethical standpoint, meat might, even if they used to love meat, if they tried to eat it again, it might not be appealing at all, not because of the taste, but because of those associations, in their minds.
Okay. Great response. Last question. Leslie asks, I'm not sure how to pronounce this correctly, sommelier?
Sommelier.
Sommelier? Sorry, I botched that.
It's okay.
A super taster.
Absolutely. So for people who do not know, the word sommelier, and you can look in the chat and you can see how it's spelled, but sommelier is the French word for a wine expert. This is somebody who's trained to tell you not just what wine is good and why, but to tell you if you're having the filet mignon, you want to have this wine with the filet mignon. But if you're having the duck, you want this wine. Yeah, they're definitely super tasters, and some of that is probably genetic, and then they go through an extensive training process. So the genetics probably give them the ability to have the sensation. The training is what allows them to start to be able to understand those sensations and articulate them in a consistent, kind of standardized manner.
Okay, great. We got through all of our questions. Oh,
All right. Oh, Micah raised his hand.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
yeah. I have a follow-up question from the one previously answered about being trained. Like, can you condition your mind? So let's say like you used to eat meat all the time, but now you don't eat it anymore and you don't like the taste. So then when you do eat it, you notice that your body has a negative reaction, like it makes you have to go to the bathroom or it makes you feel sick. Is that your mind telling you that? Or like how does that work exactly?
That's a fantastic question. My guess is it's a combination. Depending on the reasons why you haven't been eating meat, there might be a kind of an emotional response that's going on. But it also may be, depending on what it is, it may be that your body has become unaccustomed to breaking down, to digesting certain very specific compounds, because our bodies have enzymes that are designed for certain specific food components. It's not to say that you can't restart making those enzymes, but if you don't need those enzymes for a long period of time, your body will probably slow down the production of those specific enzymes, at least until you reintroduce that food.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Okay, so please keep the questions moving, coming in. I'm gonna go ahead through the slides a little bit more, because what I'd like to do is, I do want to stop on this slide, and then I want to talk about flavor, right? Because that's the back half. So to me, anytime we learn that the human body has a capacity to do something, especially if it is delimited in some way, I want to know why. Now, in some cases, and this is a case where I don't really know why, I'm speculating. And I'm speculating based on things that I've read other people speculate about, right? I'm speculating just sort of based on logic, right? But if you think about why would humans have these 5 and only these 5, plus maybe fat, right? Why would it have been important as we evolved as a species for us to be able to detect these specific tastes. And I'll let you read it rather than read it out loud to you. But I can tell you that, and if we put fat on the list, that would be for slow energy, right? But I think if you look at this list, if you know anything about nutrition, then it sort of gives you a sense of, oh, that makes sense. Humans would have needed both quick energy and long-term energy. We would have needed protein, and we would have needed vitamins, which is what you find in a lot of fruits, right? We would have needed to avoid things that would make us ill. So that's my sort of amalgam of why we have those 5. Why can't we taste, for example, calcium? Because we can't taste calcium, right? There's a whole nother question. Somebody who's going to go into nutrition or physiology and looking for a dissertation topic, there's your question. Why can't we taste calcium? We already talked about this. This is the last thing I'm about to say about taste until we get to the end, and that is these tastes can interact with each other. They can interact with each other in very, very subtle ways. Those of you who bake, you know that if you're going to make something sweet, like cake even, you add a pinch of salt, don't you? Every single recipe for cake, for cookies, for pie crust, for anything like that, the overwhelming taste is sweet, and yet you add salt to the recipe. Why? Because a tiny bit of salt somehow interacts with sugar in your mouth, and it makes the sugar signal to the brain stronger. So that little bit of salt means that the food will taste sweeter than it would without the salt. And if you've ever made the mistake and left the salt out, you know your cookies didn't taste, they tasted bland. They tasted like biscuits, not cookies. And so we'll come back to all of this towards the end, but I do want you to hold the thought that these tastes don't sort of stand alone. And an interesting thing to know about taste, some of you guys probably were taught, like in elementary school or middle school, that there's certain parts of the tongue that taste sweetness and certain parts taste bitterness and certain parts taste saltiness. Did you guys learn that?
Yes, I learned that.
Right? It's actually not true. It turns out that almost every taste bud has taste cells for all 5 tastes, which is interesting. I have no idea where that misconception came, but it is a misconception. Okay, so now we're going to talk about flavor, right? Way more complicated. We are going to talk about 5 components. The first one is smell. And some of you guys know this already. There are compounds in foods that evaporate. They either evaporate into the air. You know, if you walk into the kitchen and somebody has been making chicken soup or tomato soup or pasta sauce, or they're baking a pizza, you smell it, right? Chocolate chip cookies, you smell it. Pie, you smell. But even foods that don't necessarily put a scent into the air, once they get into our mouths, which are warmer than the air, they evaporate within our own mouths. And you can see in the picture here, there's if you've taken anatomy, you know that at the back of the mouth, there's your throat that goes down, but there's also an opening, and volatile compounds, things that have evaporated into the air space, they can actually go up the back of the throat and get into your nasal passages. And now we sense smell from the food. I'm guessing some of you guys knew that already, right? Maybe, maybe not.
Any thumbs up, guys? Anybody knew that?
New information?
Kayla said somewhat.
Okay. Stephanie, do we need to stop for any questions?
Jackie said yes. Faith said a little in regards to if they knew a little bit about
The smell? Okay. Okay. This is what I hinted at earlier. There is this sensation called chemesthesis, and it is when compounds in the individual foods trigger nerve endings, not in the taste buds, that go to the brain, to the taste center, and literally say, I taste sweetness, I taste sourness. But these trigger more like a physical sensation or a temperature sensation. So we have hot and cold, but we also have these others, right? We have drying, stinging, tingling. Those are also part of flavor. I'm assuming everybody here has, at some point or another, had some flat soda, right? The bubbles all gone. It doesn't taste the same, does it? Like literally, it doesn't taste the same because that tingling sensation, which is not a taste, is a contributor to flavor. So that's why if you like soda, you probably don't like flat soda because it doesn't taste the way you think it's supposed to taste. How the food feels literally against the sides of your mouth and on your tongue, right? Is it stiff? Is it soft? Is it chewy? Is it gummy? And people have very strong reactions to these textures, and often they're very different. How many of you guys like tapioca? Or it's what, if you don't know what tapioca is, it's in bubble tea, if that helps.
We have some comments in the chat. They're saying, I do, exclamation point.
Me
I
too.
do. I don't mind tapioca pudding. Yes, those are good, and I do.
Okay, does anybody dislike that sensation?
Kayla mentioned that she hasn't had any.
Okay.
Daniel has yet to try it.
Does anybody recognize this picture?
I do. I'm not sure what it's called. I forgot. Okra? Is it okra?
Yeah, that's okra.
Yes.
How many of you guys like okra?
Let's see. Faith, let's see. A lot of people said that they knew what it was.
Okay.
People like Danielle says me, Jayla, I do. Danielle, I love it.
Hey,
Sam
okay.
says yes, but it's very slimy. Some Faith is 50-50 with it.
Okay.
Priscilla she likes it. Micah thinks it's slimy.
Mm-hmm.
Rightfully.
It is. You know, okra, if you were to talk about the taste of okra, going back to those 5 tastes, it actually has very little of any of those. It doesn't have much acid. It has virtually no sugar. It's not bitter. It's not savory. I'm losing the last one, guys. It's not particularly salty on its own. But what it does have is a texture. And some people love that texture, and some people do not love that texture, right? Temperature plays a role. And this part of this is what I got on the top there. Part of this is, remember going back to smell. Oh yeah, Stephanie?
Sorry, I just wanted to add, Tiffany had a question. She asked, is it nutritious?
Is okra nutritious? It is. It's very nutritious. Particularly lots and lots of fiber, which most Americans get a pathetically small amount of. And in particular, just wearing my little nutrition hat for a moment, there's different kinds of fiber. The fiber in okra is really helpful if you have a family history or you have already developed either heart disease or diabetes. Both of them very common amongst Americans, right? So if you can eat okra, it would be a wonderful thing to put in your diet if it's not already in your diet.
We have 2 more questions.
Oh, please.
In regards to okra. Cheryl asks, what causes okra to be slimy?
Great question. It is the fiber. In fact, the kind of fiber it's in okra. It's also, give you some other examples. Have you guys ever bought fresh pineapple and cut it up yourself? It has a kind of a sliminess on the surface, doesn't it? When on the cut surface. That's another example. There's a type of fiber. It's in all plants, but it is particularly high in, aloe is another one. If you cut open an aloe leaf and you pull it apart, can you picture that kind of goo that comes out? That's the same thing that's in pineapple. It's the same thing that's in okra. It is a substance that the plant makes in response to being injured. And it's sort of like when we form a scab over a wound, that's their version of a scab. And it's thick and sticky because what it's trying to do is lay down a layer through which bacteria cannot penetrate. That's why it's so gummy. It's kind of literally trying to trap them in the same way that if you were trying to swim through Jello, you wouldn't get very far. Does that make sense?
Wow, that was
Yeah.
very informative.
Cool, right?
That's amazing. To know that plants, that's how that's their form of trying to
That's their immune protection.
exactly. Priscilla has a question. She said, "Does it matter how it is prepared?"
Oh, yes. You're not going to take the fiber away, so that's not a concern. The main concern I would have is a lot of people do like to dip okra in batter and then deep fry it, in which case you've picked up an awful lot of oil and calories. But if you're talking about like what the other typical way people eat okra often is to chop it and put it in a soup or a stew. That would be a terrific way. From a nutrition standpoint, that would be a terrific way to prepare okra.
I'm gonna go ahead and cook some okra for dinner.
There you go, right?
We have another question from our Zoom tech actually.
Okay.
So know that they're engaging. Great.
Okay, great.
He said, most of the time okra is fried. Does it lose any of the fiber or nutrition being cooked that way?
No. And as long as, if you're talking about like pan frying, so you have a little bit of oil in the pan and you don't have any batter on the okra, not a problem.
Okay, great. Kayla asks, is it similar to cutting onions? And I believe it's going back to the question about sliminess.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. When I think about cutting onions, then what I think about is the chemosthesis of onions, but it's true they do get slimy. So it probably is the exact same thing. That's a great point.
Julissa asks, is it the same way with snacks that is in high protein?
Say that again?
She asks, is it the same way with snacks that is high in protein?
In the sense of, is there fiber or, because I've been running my mouth so much, I'm not sure what you mean. The same
Taste.
as
Should it taste?
in terms of like sliminess or texture.
Maybe if you want to unmute Julissa,
Yeah.
maybe that could help clarify a bit and we can answer your question.
So she was mentioning about fiber having the taste, and I was just like, well, is that the same way with protein? Because there's some snacks that are high in protein and it just has like a sweet taste to it. Is it like the same way?
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. So it depends. It kind of depends on where the protein is coming from. If the protein, many protein snacks, that protein is coming from milk powder, that might have a little sweetness to it. If it's coming from, increasingly now, it's coming from pea flour, that has definitely got sweetness to it. If the protein is coming from meat and there's sweetness in it, then I would look at the ingredient list and see if they've added some kind of outside sweetener. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't getting it.
Of course. One of our attendees mentioned that, I'm looking for it. I just think everybody might want to know if this is true, if it might help in the future. I don't know. Maybe. Tiffany said, I heard okra is good for pregnant women.
Well, I can think of two reasons why that could be very well. Number one, because of the high fiber, it makes it easier to move your bowels. And many pregnant women, especially towards the end of the pregnancy, they do suffer from constipation. So okra would help with that. I would have to look up to be sure. My guess is okra is probably pretty high in a B vitamin called folate. Folate is really important for pregnant women. Actually, it's really important for women who are going to get pregnant even before they're pregnant, because it prepares their bodies in such a way that they're much less likely to have babies with certain kinds of birth defects, which include conditions like spina bifida, if you've ever heard of that.
Okay, wow, very informative. Didn't know that myself. Hope everybody
Good
learned
question.
from that.
Good questions.
Great questions, everyone. We don't have any up till now. Just a couple comments on a couple others questions. That okra is delicious and
Okay.
things of that
Yay.
sort. And
Okay, so just wrapping up components of flavor as temperature then, I do want to say one thing. If you've got picky eaters, or if you're a picky eater and you're trying to broaden the kinds of foods that you're willing to eat, one trick is to consume them at room temperature or cool, because they put less odor out. And since odor is a big, huge component of flavor, if you don't have the odor, then the flavor is kind of ramped down a little bit. That's just a little trick. So sort of to put flavor then in one place, it's 5 components at least, right? It's those 5 basic tastes, plus its smell, plus it's that sensation of chemesthesis, plus texture, plus temperature. And that is why, and I've just listed some examples of foods that are relatively similar to each other. If you taste them, you would never mistake one for the other. Am I right? Those of you who eat meat, would you ever confuse beef with lamb in your mouth? And those of you who drink hot beverages, would you ever confuse coffee with tea? No?
everyone in the chat saying no.
Right? Non-fat milk versus cream, totally different things. And yet they're really actually not that different, right? And it's because of this incredibly complex mixture. This is a repeat of what the last one is saying. So now we're finally back to Hawaiian pizza. And my question is on the screen. As you look at this piece of pizza, what is going on? Why? Because I actually do love Hawaiian pizza. What's going on there? First of all, how many tastes are in there? And you can unmute and just call out if you want.
I can go ahead and read a couple from
Oh,
the
you can
chat
read. Okay.
that we're getting in. Faith says a lot. Leslie says sweet, spicy, salty.
Right? The pineapple gives us the sweetness. There's salt all over the place there. There's salt in the ham, there's salt in the cheese, right? There's spicy or chemesthesis from those green peppers, right? Those are definitely hot peppers, not bell peppers. And there's umami. There's umami in both the cheese and the meat and the tomato sauce. All 3 of those have umami, right? So we've got, and actually there's a little bit of acid in the tomato sauce and a little bit of acid in the pineapple. The only thing we don't have is bitter. We have 4 of the 5 tastes. What about flavor? Well, we got chemesthesis, right? What else have we got going on?
Feel free to type in the chat, guys, or unmute. Great. Leslie is saying texture.
That's what I was thinking. We got a ton of different textures in here. We got the texture of the pineapple, the texture of the meat, the texture of the melted cheese, the texture of the crust, right? If it's warm, we've got all of those volatiles going on. Hawaiian pizza actually is like a perfect example of how all these things come together. And even if you don't like Hawaiian pizza, there are very few people on this earth who don't like pizza if they've tried it, right? Because it is this wonderful amalgam of things that contribute to flavor. So, do we have any other comments or questions?
We don't have any yet. We
Okay.
do, I just want to mention that we do have 10 minutes
I
before.
know, that's why I'm starting to move a little bit. So what I want to say is, all right, so what? You came, you got your extra credit, but I actually want more than that for you guys. I want you, having invested in this hour, to spend an hour of your life with me on this topic. I want you to have something besides the extra credit walking away. So I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. Successful food prep, whether that is cooking, or whether that is assembling a salad, right? It involves thinking about taste and flavor. Number one, you want to combine those tastes, the 5 tastes. Almost every food that you like and almost every food that other people like has at least 2 of the 5 basic tastes. Any food that has purely just one taste is probably tasting bland. It's not engaging enough of our brains to be interesting. So in the interest of time, we won't talk about, but you can already think about now, what is it about your favorite foods? So at least 2 tastes, to the basic tastes, to provide energy. Second thing, in addition to combining the taste, you need to balance the tastes. This is a whole topic on its own, but I'll give you one example. I already talked about the little bit of salt that goes into sweet baked goods and enhancing the sweetness. If you ever make a soup or a sauce that's too salty, you can save it by putting a pinch of sugar in. Because whereby a pinch of salt increases sweet perception, a pinch of sugar decreases salt perception. And that soup that was no good because it was too salty, you don't have to throw it out. Put a pinch of sugar in there, it's going to calm that salt sensation right down. Something that is too bitter, if you add almost anything to it, if you add a little bit of umami to it, or a little bit of sour, a little bit of sugar, you're going to take that bitterness down. Yes, ma'am. Stephanie.
One of our attendees, Monet, says, could you go back to the last slide, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have any comments, Monet? Maybe you wanted a picture for future reference, maybe? I know I did. I took his.
Okay. I'm perfectly happy to send these slides if to be distributed if you guys want them, because the last couple of slides are actually kind of interesting. And we are going to run out of time. So can I do that?
Sure. If you would like, I don't know if you can go ahead and post the document in the chat if you'd like, and if you're not able to, you can also direct it to me, and I can have it directed to all of our attendees, whichever one you prefer.
I don't know how to put a whole document in the chat. Maybe you can tell me afterwards.
Sure. Everyone, just please make sure to fill out the survey, and we'll be able to get this information back to you, please. I posted the survey shortly ago, but we're just going to go ahead and proceed right now. We don't have that much time.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you I'm going to show you 1 or 2 of these, and that is when we say that you want to add salt to something, that does not have to be a salt shaker. Look at everything on this list here. Yeah, you could be a salt shaker, but it could also be cheese. It could be soy sauce. It could be miso. It could be pickle brine, right? It could be, if you eat meat, it could be bacon. And if you want to add sweetness to something, you don't have to dump sugar per se in there, right? I mean, some of this is obvious. You could put honey in, but you could put a little bit of jam. You could put ketchup. Believe it or not, that's got some sugar in it, right? You could, and this would be an amazing thing because it would give you lots of extra nutrition. You could add carrots to sweet potatoes, right? I'm guessing most of you guys have never heard of parsnips or kabocha squash, right? So a little bit more exotic. If you want to add sour, lots of options for that, right? You can have fancy ingredients or you can have plain yogurt. That'll do the same thing for you. And if you want to add bitter, which is like, wait a minute, why would I want to add bitter? But bitter, if you look at what I've circled here on the slide, bitter, if something is too sweet or too salty, bitter can tone that down just a little bit. So something to think about there. I feel like we should probably, just to show you, two more real quick. The other is you want to think about, even if a recipe doesn't call for it, right? Maybe you're gonna, here we go. Maybe you're going to switch something out, or maybe you're going to add something that has chemostasis to it, even if it's not called for. Maybe you're going to take these beans that are really good for you, but people don't like the texture. Maybe you're going to puree them into something that they don't even know has beans in it, right? So you can play around with all these 5 elements of flavor as a way of preparing food at home that everybody can enjoy, that's really better for you than maybe some of the stuff that you're getting away from home. And I'll stop being preachy at that and say, do we have any last minute questions?
Yes, if anyone has questions, comments in the chat, or just raise your hand. Leslie's mentioned, I would love to learn more about the science of taste and flavor. This was a great way to end STEM week.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Well, fill out the survey. I'll get the slides to Stephanie and she'll get the slides to you guys. And then anybody who wants more information, please feel free to email me. I can send you some links to some really great websites.
Great. Don't forget, guys, there's still a couple of other events going on today. I believe maybe 3 or 2. Also a field trip for NIST, but I believe you had to sign up at least yesterday. But the flyers have been sent to your emails, or however you got here. Check out the flyer. A couple of things still going on if you're interested. But any other questions, comments? If you loved it, maybe a heart, throw a heart, a little emoji or something. Or a big thanks. Jackie mentioned thank you. Thank you for the information. I'll go ahead and post the link one more time in case anyone missed it. Oh, Leslie also added a heart.
Oh, yay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Julie.
Everybody enjoy your spring break. Thanks for being here on a Friday afternoon.
Everyone's saying great, thanks. Some heart emojis. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. I will go ahead and wrap up this session. Oh, Danielle said it was an amazing and informative session. Danielle really enjoyed it. Leslie said, great job, Stephanie.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's
Thank
true,
you.
true, true. Great job, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Everyone says they're enjoying it. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for this wonderful session. I want to thank again Dr. Cynthia Gossage for her wonderful time and for willing to present today, and always did an amazing job, as she always does. And hopefully she'll come back next year and be with us. It's been great. Hopefully you all enjoyed it very much, and we'll make sure to get the PowerPoint presentation up to all of you, just in case you want to reference it back in the future. You're doing some cooking, you need a little extra something, just follow the presentation, and hopefully it'll help you out. Any last thoughts, anyone? Or Dr. Cynthia Gossage, would you like to add anything?
No, just I very much appreciate the organizers. I think STEM Week is an amazing thing. It's just so jam-packed with interesting, helpful, exciting information.
Great, wonderful. So maybe me and Dr. Cynthia Gossage will just wait till the end, unless anyone wanted to stick back for a moment to ask a question, but you all are free to go ahead and log off, fill out your survey, get your extra credit if your professors offered it. But if they didn't, like some of my professors didn't offer it, I just came and participated because I just enjoyed it, and I'm a STEM major. But it was great to see you all here today. We'll just wait back for a few moments. Take care, everyone. Have a great spring break.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.